Hello and welcome to Saturday Morning Cartoons, the Collider weekly podcast for all things animation, including reviews and interviews. Coming to you all the way from the backwater burg of Lindenfeld, I'll be your host, Dave Trumbore. And joining me from deep in the Belmont family vault under the crumbling castle of Vlad Tepes, it's my special guest, Evan Valentine. Welcome to the show, bud.
Oh, thanks for having me, man.
Welcome back.
Happy to be here.
It's been a while.
Oh, yeah, it has been a while, but I'm glad to come back to talk about the exploits of Trevor Belmont and the rest of his vampire hunting clan.
Absolutely. Now, I think the last time we had you here was before your current position.
That's right.
Yeah, so what have you been up to since those times?
Oh, so I am currently a writer for comicbook.com. I write about comic books, animation, anime, WWE, wrestling now, actually, and some horror stuff.
And every place that all those things cross over.
And every place that all those things cross over, which is more than you'd think.
Yeah, I would imagine that it is. When's the next Scooby-Doo wrestling movie coming out?
Oh my god, it's sooner than you'd think.
One of your main focuses, though, is anime, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So how's that been for you?
It's been very cool. I mean, one of the things that's been very cool about it is just diving back into the medium and learning a lot more about the series and everything. Like, before I had started my job, I didn't know anything about One Piece, and now I'm an expert on it.
Now you've seen all 775
there's way more than that. There's 908 episodes.
That was a test, and you passed.
You got to know about Monkey D. Luffy and the Devil Fruits.
And all his gum
powers and all that fun stuff.
In order to get the job, Evan actually had to sing the American version of the One Piece theme song. Otherwise, he would not have been hired.
I actually did have a funny interview story, because one of the things that I was asked was what was my favorite season of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and they asked me to rank it because they wanted to see if I actually knew my stuff.
Sure.
And I talked their ears off about what is the greatest anime series.
Evan would do that well before he was hired. I've heard a lot about JoJo.
Far too much. I really try to sell my friends on JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, which everyone should watch.
You shouldn't really need to be sold on it. It's so relentless that it exhausts me. I don't have the energy to keep up with it.
Really, I could talk about any one element, and it would either you'd either say this show is for me or it's not for me at all. And avoid it at all costs.
It's weirdly, I watch so much anime that it is for me, but I can only take so much of it at a time. I get so
that sounds about right.
By it. It's just I can't right now. I need
that's a good response with regards to it. Yes, for sure.
So speaking of binge watching anime and stuff, obviously we're talking Castlevania today. You guys probably figured that out by the intro, and we'll get to that in a second. But another famous vampire anime. Did you get a chance to watch Hellsing Ultimate by any chance?
Oh, yes, I did.
Did you get a chance to watch that?
That thing is relentlessly nihilistic.
It's brutal.
It is brutal. And I mean, it's funny. So, going back into my anime past, the first anime thing that I ever watched was the original Vampire Hunter D.
Even before Berserk?
Yeah. When I was about 7 years old or 8 years old, my buddy at the time had a copy of Vampire Hunter D and showed it to me. And I was like, cartoons can be this?
Yeah.
And that kind of set me on the path and everything.
Yeah, my first anime experience, I was probably 10, and it was Ninja Scroll.
Oh, God. Yeah, that's a rough one.
Very much of the same literal vein.
How about that Rockman?
Oh, boy. It was just kind of I have a lot of questions that I'm not going to have experience about, because it was rough.
What are you watching? I'm not watching anything that you need to know about.
Sesame Street, probably.
It's a cartoon about ninjas. Don't ask any more questions.
It'd probably be like the Turtles. Yeah,
just like that.
100% like the Turtles. Kids, go watch Ninja Scroll. But today, we're not talking about any of that. However, there is a vampire connection, because we're going to be talking about Season 3, Netflix's Castlevania. And if you're not familiar with that, go watch it on Netflix now, and then come back to this later while you're listening to Season 3. But before we get into our discussion today, we're going to turn it over to a friend of the show, longtime listener, Bobby Anthem. You know him, you love him. Here he is with a synopsis, Castlevania Season 3.
In the aftermath of Dracula's death, Trevor and Sypha are traveling. Alucard remains at the castle in misery, and Isaac is returning to Europe for his revenge. But Carmilla, reunited with her vampire sisters of the Styrian ruling court, sees a way to take advantage of Dracula's demise and build a new future, and she needs imprisoned Hector to achieve it.
Bobby, thank you so much, as always. Bobby, be sure to let us know who on Castlevania you would like to be. Would you like to be a vampire? Would you like to be a forge master? I picture Bobby as a forge master.
They have a rough go of it.
They do have a rough go, but I think he would be I think he'd be all right.
Yeah, unless he runs into Carmilla and her sister.
Just steer clear of the night creatures and whatnot, and you'll be fine. Forge masters, though, other than that, they got pretty cool lore.
They do.
We'll get into all that. Just to give you guys a heads up at home, though, we are going to be talking about spoilers on the show. It is out now. You've had roughly 2 days, depending on where you are, to check it out. So we are going to be talking about spoilers. This episode may also include some adult language, because the show itself is rather adult. Like Ninja Scroll Nelson.
Pretty adult.
It's pretty adult stuff, kids out there. So just as a heads up.
Lots of guts, lots of nudity, all those.
Surprisingly, the nudity was interesting because that was not a staple of the first 2 seasons, really.
Yeah. Now that I think about it, not particularly. Way more on the gory side for the first 2 seasons. Yeah,
it's always been violent, it's been bloody, and it's been gory, but this is the first season we actually get like a sexual kind of like element incorporated into the story. And we'll talk about that in a minute too. But if this happens to be your first time listening to the show, here's how we do this. Our review is going to be broken down to the good, the bad, and the LOL. So is that a Clint Eastwood movie, as my friend Sean is fond of talking about every week? No, it is not. However, in the good, we will be talking about what worked for us. The bad, obviously, what did not quite work for us. And the LOL, rather than the ugly, is what made us laugh intentionally or otherwise. We want to be respectful to the many, many, many talented people who work on these shows, but every once in a while, there's something funny that comes across on the screen, makes us laugh for one reason or another. So we're going to get there. Not a lot of funny stuff to be found in this show.
A lot of
by design.
Intentionally funny or unintentionally funny?
Intentionally, they have some like fun.
They have some nice banter.
Some banter, some dry, witty one-liners.
That's interjected with horrifying just disembowelments.
And
child murders. Sometimes a child has to go run to an apple tree and fall into
a spoiler pit.
Into a terrible spoiler pit.
Man, what a thing that had nothing to do with the story.
Yeah, for real. I mean, that was also such a funny thing because Sypha's reaction to essentially be like, are those animal bones? And it's just like, yeah, I don't think animals wear outfits and clothing. That's clearly...
Animals don't wear underpants. They're allowed to run free.
Maybe in this world of Castlevania where the animals could be secretly monsters.
It is true. Let's get into it a little bit. Mm-hmm. So before we get into specifics there, we're talking season 3. All 10 episodes are on the table. From a high level, Evan, what works for you about overall season 3?
Oh, okay. I guess one of the things that you kind of have to talk about with the good of season 3 is just the world that was left following the end of season 2.
Yeah, so set that up. Bobby talked about it in our synopsis.
Oh, yeah.
So break that down,
Yeah, with the end of season 2, we saw Dracula being killed, which was as fans of the video game series Castlevania know, Dracula dies and comes back to life on an almost even games. Dracula's alive.
Right.
In odd games, Dracula is dead.
He's on his way back.
He's on his way back. A cult is trying to bring him back. His son is trying to kill him. All these different things. And so at the end of season 2 and one of my favorite animated action scenes of all time, I'd have to say that rivals Avatar: The Last Airbender and some fight scenes that I've seen in some anime. Trevor, Alucard, and Sypha, our 3 favorite vampire hunters, storm Dracula's castle, have an insane battle with the vampires there that's just amazing, as well as having the Castlevania theme playing in the background. It's just so great. But they managed to kill Dracula, and they kind of split apart Game of Thrones style, where we have a lot of different storylines that never meet ever again during the season. But Sypha and Trevor have become much closer. Alucard is living an isolated life that had me... This season, one of the best things about this season is the number of belly laughs that I had.
Interesting.
Because, Alucard talking with the dolls... was... Where Alucard is currently living in Dracula's castle. He's very isolated. Yes. He has no idea how much time has passed.
He says it could have been days, weeks, months, or years. We don't really know.
It could be happening at the same time as Trevor and Sypha, or maybe it's much longer. We have no idea. But he's set up a doll that resembles Trevor and a doll that resembles Sypha, and is talking with them about how he's losing his mind.
Right.
And
much like Tom Hanks on the island with Wilson.
Oh yeah, with Wilson. That's Wilsons. Great. Yeah. And so, as well as just Trevor and Sypha's banter between one another is fantastic. Like, one of the things that we'll dive a little more into is the idea of this season being a slow burn.
Yes.
I mean, that's kind of how it was presented. Not so much in the first season, because the first season was just 4 episodes, so they had to do a lot with a little amount of time.
And the second season was only twice that, so
second
it was only
season,
8.
yeah.
So and even a little more realistic.
Even still, like, that second season, I can still remember it kind of being a slow burn, because it was essentially like, we got to know the 3 characters, we got to know Dracula's henchmen, some of who didn't make it to the end.
Yeah,
Peter Stormare. Or Peter Stormare's vampire who gets killed by...
I'm Godbrand the Viking. I can't say that, but I also like to make boats.
Yeah, too bad. He never even got to fight a Belmont or anything before the end of that.
He got killed by a human, spoiler alert if you haven't seen it.
Yeah. Well, a very badass human who happens to hate mankind.
That's true.
That's another great, really the writing from Warren Ellis, who's a comic book writer who has written things like DC's Authority, Desolation Jones, and just a ton of other different Marvel's Moon Knight, which is the best interpretation of the character I've ever read.
And we've yet to see that on the big screen.
We have to see it soon to see it on Disney Plus, I believe. Hopefully, maybe, fingers crossed. But Warren Ellis's character work is just fantastic. Yeah. The way that he's able to bounce all these characters off one another and like their witty banter, their repertoire. What season 3 is able to do, not just with the returning characters that are favorites, but also introducing new characters, both heroes and villains that are able to be very like charismatic. Saint Germain, who fans of the video game series may or may not know.
Yeah, for me, I was just kind of like, who is this?
Yeah, who is, even I didn't, before I started, I'm somewhat familiar. There's the Castlevania lore wormhole, quote unquote. Yeah. Is insane. It's really like, it's a series that spans thousands of years.
Many generations.
Like into the past, into the present, and far into the future.
Which is like this sort of sci-fi aspect of it that we kind of get a glimpse of in season 3, which I was not expecting.
Neither was I.
Which is pretty cool. Yeah. To go back to a couple of things that you touched on and break them down a little bit more. So, season 2, I think, probably that standout episode with the fight against Dracula is one of the best things from this series so far. I was like, how is Powerhouse gonna... Powerhouse Animation is one of the main animation studios and sort of like choreography, storyboard artists to set everything up for these big sequences. If you guys out there are interested in hearing more from Ellis and producer Kevin Colby themselves, check out Collider, because I do have an interview with them as well, so we talk about a lot of these same things. But one of the things Ellis talked about in the interview was certain fight sequences they actually do script out beat by beat.
Oh, very cool. They storyboard them.
Some of them. Well, he scripts it, they take it to Powerhouse, they storyboard it. But sometimes he'll take it to Sam Dietz and just be like, here are all the things that need to happen. For example, in season 1, where Trevor is fighting the creature in like the Undercroft, and Sypha is like a statue and he has to free her from...
Oh, yeah, the Cyclops.
The Cyclops. So that was scripted beat by beat. But then other things, he'll just say like, here's where we start, here's kind of what happens, here's where we need to end. You guys go crazy and figure it out from there.
Oh, nice, yeah.
So I think probably for the Dracula story, this Dracula fight, a combination of the two, probably.
Sure.
But for me, one of the best sequences of the entire series. Was there anything in this season that you think was up to that level?
Rivals. Yeah. That final fight, and again, before we go into it, just, a reminder that we're going to dive into some serious spoilers. So this is going to be one of those things where it's like, if you don't want to know what happens, if you haven't seen it yet, like, steer clear. But that final fight scene where the cult of Dracula has opened up a gateway to hell, and is unleashing some of Castlevania's weirdest monsters, and that's what kind of set it apart, I think, from season 2. Is that season 2 was strictly pretty much all vampires. Like there was a couple of fight scenes where they fought against like the creatures of the night, but at the end of this, Trevor and Sypha are fighting a Cthulhu, I don't even... what's that thing from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe?
Oh, God.
That has the hooves, and it's like
a satyr?
Yeah. The thing that was shooting the bow and arrow.
The bow, but like an enormous like satyr. But
yeah,
they're all kind of like weirdly. Some of them are kind of celestial because there were some that looked like
the angels, and it was very like
it was like the cherubim or not cherubim. What are the seraphim?
Yeah.
All the hierarchies of angels. There was one creature. There were a couple of them, but one type of creature that were like pretty powerful enemies when they came out.
Insanely powerful. That's just like, what are we going to do again?
And like they have to go up against like 3 or 4 of them. It's just kind of like, what is going on?
That is really like one of the things that really, aside from the character work that Ellis does, just the fight. I mean, we've been talking about it, but like the fight scenes are just jaw dropping in terms of. There's a scene particularly, and we were talking about it a little bit prior to the recording, was the Sypha's learning to bend electricity, like a certain other show, but Sypha's abilities to bend have always been impressive. They were certainly impressive in the season 2 fight, but in this one particularly, where she's blasting off thanks to the fire powers and everything, is just really amazing. And the coordination and choreography of Trevor's use of the whip. Yeah. And then the whips.
Themselves.
Did you know that both of those whips have names? They have official names.
One's Vampire Killer, right? And the other one is
Morningstar. Yeah. So one is
and Dracula knows both of them, too.
Yes, Dracula,
Season 2, he's like,
I remember the... Yeah, and that's another thing that goes back to the lore of... Because this is all basically... You could make the argument that this is a retelling of the games. This is like the events of Castlevania 3, the Nintendo 8-bit game that brought all these characters together and everything.
Was that Symphony of the Night? Because that's originally what this was supposed to be based on.
Oh, Symphony of the Night. So where we are in the Castlevania timeline is, I think we are a little bit after part 3, and we're kind of in... I wish I could remember the name, but there was a video game that starred Hector fighting, starred Isaac fighting against Hector.
It's weird because they kind of swap their roles somewhat between the game and the series.
So they've kind of done that. So we're a little bit after that. We're definitely moving into Symphony of the Night. I think that a lot of fans are going to be happy with the groundwork that's being laid. That's essentially like, this arguably, season 4 could be Symphony of the Night.
Sure, yeah.
If they wanted to go in that direction, but...
Well, you and I were talking about another video game, too. I don't know is that in your good section, though, or is that in something else?
The Judgment?
Yeah.
Oh, no, it's terrible.
We'll take
as long as we're talking about it, we should talk about that. So this season, another thing that Castlevania fans will really like is that this season is... fit to bursting with Easter eggs of just stuff that happened in the video games. One of which that I never expected to see was Castlevania Judgment, which was a fighting game that used time travel in order to bring together all of the different Belmonts and different monsters. While that doesn't happen in this season, there isn't a fight scene where all of them come together.
But there could have been.
There could have been. Yeah. There could have been. If Saint Germain had been asleep for maybe 5 more minutes, he might have been able to see that. Yeah. But Saint Germain, for those of you who don't know, who's a new character that's introduced in this 3rd season.
And that's Bill Nighy, too, by the way. Who's
does a fantastic job. Good. Honestly, all the voice actors they get for this are just amazing. Everybody is at the top of their game. Lance Reddick's in there too, right?
Reddick's in there, and like James Callis, you were talking earlier about how you liked Alucard. He does the voices. He does an impersonation of Trevor and an impersonation of Sypha. But it's James Callis doing his voice. That was really fun.
He does a really fantastic job. And so Saint Germain in the original game series is a time traveler. Mm-hmm. And while you don't necessarily see him time traveling in this, there's a number of different Easter eggs in terms of he has the hourglass necklace.
His little Harry Potter thing.
His little Harry Potter thing on there. And he's looking for the Infinite Corridor, which is a big thing in a few of the Castlevania games. And where Castlevania Judgment is referenced is that, and during one sequence, Saint Germain dreams that he runs into a woman who we don't know. I
was going to ask you if you knew who that was.
I actually don't. I need to do a little more research in terms of who that might be. It's like a lost love of Saint Germain.
Yeah, we just know from season 3 lore that it was like a woman he was in love with, or a person, I guess, he was in love with previously, and then he lost her. It was sort of like an Inception thing, right? Where they were playing around in this like multi-dimensional corridor, and he lost her there, so now he's trying to find his way back so he can find her and hopefully rescue her and get her out of there.
The ironic thing about his appearance is actually that in the games, he's much younger. So he's essentially, those events have probably already happened to him, and he's traveled back into the past as an older man or whatever, which is very interesting. I hope that they can kind of dive into that in future seasons. We'll see, knock on wood. But
the judgment scene.
Oh, so the judgment scene is essentially Saint Germain sees his lost lady love, sees a locale that is nothing but clocks and moving gears as if it's in a clock tower, which was the locale of the fighting game Castlevania Judgment. So yeah, that was a pull, and I don't know who. You would know better than me in terms of, did Ellis seem like he had a very good understanding of like the lore?
So when Ellis and I were talking about how he scripted the fighting scenes and stuff like that, I parlayed that into same question about the Infinite Corridor. And he says he made the artist's and animator's life a living hell for that because he had all those ideas in mind. Like he wanted him to be in this kind of like crazy psychedelic rainbow colored corridor.
It's very like I guess I kind of did a disservice in not breaking down what the Infinite Corridor looks like outside of those things.
It multiple times
because it's very much like you don't necessarily see scenes from time, but I was actually you do. You do see a couple of scenes from time.
You don't know when they're necessarily.
You don't know when it's happening. Yeah. You can make the argument that actually some of those scenes might have come from. Oh man, what is it? Curse of the Moon?
That's what I was trying to figure out, is if they were game related or
they might. There was the oh man, what is that? You see, I don't know enough. There's the one that came out for the Nintendo DS that was that starred a young reincarnated version of Dracula who was named Soma, I believe.
Okay.
Or something, and that took place in the year, I want to say 2030 or something like that.
It's coming up soon.
Yeah, it's coming up. That terrible apocalyptic demon war is right around the bend. So that's something that has yet to happen in the series proper, but there are scenes that Saint Germain sees that could
they're
be
possible
revisited.
realities, yeah.
And
Ellis was also saying too about, we were talking about the design. He says he pulled a bunch of like 70s like Fillmore like psychedelic posters. From,
you can totally tell. Yeah.
And he gave them to Sam and Adam Dietz. I think Adam Dietz was actually the one who was kind of in charge of shepherding the whole Infinite Corridor sequence, because that thing had to be a nightmare.
That was
to produce, because there's so much stuff
and it's crazy because it's amazing. It's amazing, but it's also not essential to the story.
No, it's very much off to the side.
It's very much so. It's more impressive at the fact that they put in that much work and detail into something that's not necessarily consequential to the story that we're experiencing now, but that will be consequential to...
Well, and it's really smart, too, from a storytelling standpoint, because now that that's been introduced, you can pull in quite literally anything that you want.
Yeah.
By using this kind of like demon portal.
Time travel, you can
anything.
You can like, skip through the games and bring them all kind of together.
Anytime that you want to. That was pretty smart. I love at one point, he's, Saint Germain is just kind of like looking out on this like savannah, and you see this like two-legged creature running at him. I'm like, oh, he's back in like prehistoric times. And then it gets closer to him, and it's like what is it, like an EVO?
You know what it is? Like, it reminded me of War of the Worlds.
Like it reminded me of RoboCop.
Oh yeah, like the oh man,
ED something.
Yeah. That it looks like that, but that is I want to say that might be like some kind of futuristic Dracula army.
But that was the thing. I didn't know if like, because there's like an Aboriginal shaman.
That's right. Yeah,
there's like people running through.
But it's clearly not in their time period.
No. It's very separate. Yeah. Like everything.
But they're laying the groundwork for future seasons with that
and they can do anything they want with that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So Saint Germain, a great introduction, if only for that reason.
Yeah.
But I've also got something else for Saint Germain that I'll talk about in the LOLs. I want to make sure we knock out some of this other stuff.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
We should probably talk a little bit about how this season is kind of broken up.
Yeah,
so it's
for sure.
4 separate kind of
So it's very much, and the way that I would describe it is that it's very much like the best seasons of Game of Thrones, at least in a storytelling way, where you follow a number of separate characters that will not. The first 2 seasons were about bringing together the characters that we know,
right,
and them achieving their goal of killing Dracula and then going their separate ways. Right. So now we see the storylines we follow are Trevor and Sypha walking into a small village that I want to say is something of it's like a pit stop. Essentially,
it's kind of like a crossroads town.
It's like a crossroads. Yeah. They're dealing with monster attacks as well as a slowly forming cult of Dracula that are so creepy and so just like, oh, well, because Saint Germain tries to infiltrate them by essentially saying, I know a lot about hell. Do you know the origins of that mark that you all wear?
We'll get to the LOLs because that was one of my...
That was a big one.
How he just wheeled his way in. Because these guys are pretty nuts. They're kind of like lobotomized to the point of just being like all in on hell.
And so aside from that, we already talked a little bit about Alucard, but to talk a little bit about who he encounters a brother and a sister who essentially come from an Eastern...
Oh, they say Japan.
They say Japan. Yeah. Okay, yeah.
So Japan exists like in this world.
Yeah.
And then everything else in kind of like the middle European Transylvania kind of area. They tweak those names a little bit here and there. But Japan still exists.
Yeah.
But
or whatever.
What I loved about that was they introduced like, it's not just vampires here in Transylvania and the surrounding areas.
Yeah.
They're everywhere.
And they rule.
Horribly. Lords and ladies and empresses and whatever.
And I don't remember the name of the vampire lord who was killed quite dramatically in season 2 by Sypha, who had turned her into, I believe when she was in mist form, Sypha turned her into ice and slammed down her fist and crushed her into the ground, which was amazing. But this brother and sister pair essentially talk about how they had to experience some really terrible events under her rule and are attempting to learn as much as they can from Alucard. And Alucard himself, who is in a state of, I want to say, emerging madness as he begins to lose his mind.
Real close to losing it because he's been alone for we don't know how long. And he's talking to dolls. The whole season opens with a really beautiful sequence of light and nature and life and just kind of like peace outside of Dracula's castle, which sits on top of the Belmont estate. And then it just shows Alucard in the best anime sequence ever, just preparing a meal.
Yeah. Oh, that's right.
What anime?
Boy, that looked delicious.
Yeah, it looked great.
When he catches the fish and he uses his super speed to like conk it on the head.
Just like humanely kills it.
Yeah, and the funny thing about that, and another thing that kind of shows you, that gives you an added layer of his character, is that you don't really know if he needs to eat. I think he mentions it in season 2. I just did a recent rewatch. Oh, you did? Yeah.
He mentions that he's half human.
Oh, so he does.
He doesn't necessarily need to, I don't think, but he likes.
Oh, he likes the feeling. So, but it gives him structure and routine. Yes, is the thing, and
staves off that madness.
At least a little bit. But he amazingly cooks. Really, foodies are gonna love that.
Oh, you're gonna love it. That's a great scene. Just watch that over and over, and then don't watch the rest of it because that's the happiest he'll be.
Oh yeah, it's a roller coaster. It goes up. Then it goes terribly
Well, let me
down.
ask you about that. So again, spoilers, because there's a pretty big reveal at the end of the season. In a great montage that kind of ties all these storylines together through an interesting way. What was your opinion of, was it Sumi and Taka when they came onto the scene? Did you trust them? Did you like them?
Well, I did like them. I thought they showed us a new side of Alucard that we hadn't seen before.
Like a teacher.
Yeah, like kind of like in a teacher role and everything. Their betrayal of Alucard was somewhat predictable in terms.
It was one of those like always kind of, I'm not sure.
In what is possibly like the spiciest scene of the series.
If you're going to go somewhere, that's a heck of a way to go.
I like them. I thought, and that's one of the things that, and I guess we'll talk a little bit more about this when we go into the bad, is that this is very, as I said, there's a strength and a weakness to that Game of Thrones structure. That is that, in a way, season 3 is amazing. The character work is fantastic, but for a lot of people, they'll look at it as something as a bump in the road,
really,
to something bigger. Like
sure,
when essentially. Like, again, to use Game of Thrones as something of an example, when you look at those seasons of, like, season 2, 3, or what have you, where everybody is separated, you're waiting for them all to get back together to go to King's Landing, to fight the White Walkers, and this is
to do something better than whatever the final season was.
Unfortunately, the final season, I'm sure Castlevania will be able to, based on these seasons, it will be able to steer clear of that. But, this season essentially it breaks up the characters and puts them on their own individual past, most of which just never meet. Yeah. The characters were introduced as we already touched upon, Trevor and Sypha and Saint Germain and Alucard. And then there are the Devil Forgers.
Yeah, they had some interesting, they each get their own kind of storyline, but Isaac is the main player in his story. Hector is not.
Yeah.
Did you have a preference between the two?
I loved Isaac's more.
Same.
I would have to give it to Isaac because Isaac, who is a character who is attempting to eradicate all of mankind, is perhaps the most human character of all of those that we see in Castlevania, who is constantly, it's almost tragic, he's constantly looking for reasons as to why humanity should survive. He's been sent on this,
he is.
Let me rephrase.
They play with that idea though throughout the course of this season, because so if you're not familiar with the Forge Masters and the Devil Forge Masters and what they can do, they can not only make weapons and things like that, but they also make armies for the vampires. So they're humans who can bring creatures of the night sort of back to life from fallen soldiers or from enemies or just through death. They can basically pull a soul or whatever it is out of hell, put it in a recently deceased body, and then animate it, and poof, you have a brand new soldier.
Yeah.
So Isaac has decided to carve a bloody swath across Europe, looking for Hector, who betrayed him and Dracula, and making his own army as he goes.
As he continues to move across the world. And
he's basically like a conqueror at this point, but that's not his intent.
That's definitely not, because there's a number of characters that he meets along the way. Who are awesome, who give a very good reason as to why he shouldn't destroy humanity. Not in a way that they're vying for him not to do it, but just in that he's experiencing humanity at its finest.
Human kindness.
Human kindness. And for every time he meets one of them, he's immediately greeted by some soldiers that see this guy who's surrounded by, oh my God, you know what scene that I just remembered right now? Is the scene where Isaac is around the campfire and he says, which one of you demons is the one that can talk?
The Fly Eyes.
With the eyes.
Fly Eyes.
Is that his official name?
His name's like Fly Eyes.
Oh my God. That is by far and it's creepy on a number of different levels. Yeah. Not just because this thing looks like one of the creepiest monsters that you've seen in Castlevania so far.
Yeah.
To kind of paint the scene a little bit, Isaac, after eradicating, I believe, 2 cities, at least, sits at a campfire surrounded by his army of monsters and begins to talk to one of them, asking for the one that is able to talk with the Fly Eyes.
Because all of these monsters, these creatures of the night, they are 100% loyal to the Forge Master, but they're basically just beasts of burden, mindless soldiers. They follow orders and that's it.
Yeah, and so Fly Eyes begins to describe his life before, when he was a part of the Roman civilization, I believe.
Because they're pulled from hell, so you don't know what, when they're gonna, how long they've been there, who you're gonna pull up, so you never know what you're gonna get.
And in a very, it's a creepy but enlightening scene wherein Fly Eyes says how liberated he now is, seeing sin as a release for him moving forward. And it's very just the way that, again, this is another way that Ellis's characterization and Powerhouse's animation works so well in conjunction with one another, is that setting the scene of having this fire-lit conversation where this terrifying monster is talking about the freedom that he finds in reveling in his sin. Yeah. That is no longer like nobody can stop him from doing it. And the way that Isaac receives that, you know, there's a part where I thought that Isaac would begin to realize that these monsters were just as bad as humankind, but I think he sees a freedom in them. And aside from all of that stuff, Isaac's ability to bring demons into these corpses is amazing for fight scenes, because when he's fighting a large group of
like human soldiers,
when he stabs one of them and kills them, they immediately turn into one of these horrifying demons.
And they're not just like zombies. They don't just like get glazed over in the eyes and they're just like human soldiers. They morph.
One of them becomes, and he just stabs one of them, I believe, but one of them becomes like a 50-foot.
I definitely want to talk about that scene, but I want to build to that. So there's a couple things to touch on here. When I think of Castlevania, I think of obviously the incredible action sequences and animation that we get. Mm-hmm. I think of the fantastic lore that we get to pull from the video games, which for me is a lot richer even than the video games themselves.
Oh yeah, for sure.
There's a lot more context and narrative to it. But then this is rare, especially in adult animation. You get moments of pause. You get moments where characters just sit quietly.
Yep.
They talk to each other.
They
have these
reflect.
deep philosophical reflections about life and religion and hell and God and demons and existence, and whether, you know, an entire species, are they cattle? Are they meant for extinction?
There's a lot of different
to rule. Like there's so
many different viewpoints in terms of like. There's a good and an evil side, but there's also many different factions of, and that just kind of goes into jumping back quickly into Alucard, and where he eventually ends up is the perfect, like road to essentially Alucard is becoming his dad.
You can talk about that.
Oh yeah. So, Alucard, having just become almost naively so, becomes friends, a mentor to this brother and sister team. The brother and sister team offer themselves to Alucard.
They have a sexy time.
They have a sex scene that is also, and we'll get a little more into the plight of Hector.
We can talk about this all together.
Oh yeah.
This is the moment, and this is one of my good things too. Mm-hmm. It's not the first time that sex is kind of like addressed in Castlevania, because you get the sense that Trevor and Sypha have been having sex on the road, and their relationship is deepening, and that's like the one good positive portrayal of sex in this show. Mm-hmm. But three things are kind of happening at the same time by the end of this season. Alucard is in bed, and he's approached by the brother and sister who both disrobe, and they, you know, want to have basically a threesome with him. Lenore, who is one of the four...
Carmilla's sisters.
She's one of the four vampire sisters of Styria, exactly. She's been kind of the main focus of that story, because she is getting close to Hector and
what a great job she does.
What a fantastic sequence between the two of them throughout this season. Mm-hmm. With their story, like I like Isaac's better because it's got more philosophical
to kind of and also just way more action packed as well as
it's a great balance.
As well as the fact that
and the
poor Hector.
Poor Hector, man.
Poor Hector.
So to set it up, if you haven't watched, I don't know why you're still listening, but Hector's another forge master, and he's imprisoned. He was basically dragged to Styria by Carmilla. He's treated like a dog or less.
Just awful.
Treated awfully. Lenore goes and she plays the diplomat. Mm-hmm. So she tends to him, she takes care of him. There's a great scene where he tries to get the upper hand and she puts him back in his place. But
turns into some bats.
She turns into some bats and she's crazy powerful. But also then still treats him respectfully after that. And they have a really interesting relationship that plays out throughout the season. But they end up having sex as well.
At the exact
same time, at least in the montage. So there's a lot of stuff going on in the montage. Mm-hmm. Everybody's having sex. Or fighting monsters.
Yeah, or fighting monsters. All of those things.
But what's interesting is that in this portrayal of sex with either Hector and Lenore or Sumitaka and Alucard, this is more of a power play. This is sex as manipulation, as a power dynamic, and as ultimately betrayal.
Yeah, Lenore's way to get control of Hector is by putting a little bit of the truth into the mix. The breakdown of his servitude to Dracula was absolutely amazing. Of like, well, what was Dracula going to do for you? Well, you know, I suppose he was going to give me my own place to live. Did he ever tell you that he was going to do that? Well, no, but I guess I just assumed. So he wasn't like paying you. He wasn't like doing anything. And he's like, well, no, I mean.
And she was basically like, Dracula's plan was to kill all humans, right? And he's like, yeah, but like not me, right? She's like, oh, so you were going to be the last of all the humans. It's like, maybe.
Yeah, I guess.
So Hector not the brightest.
No. He's just...
But she was so manipulative, though, that she was able to do that. And I love that moment where she puts the
ring on him.
Forged ring on him. And I didn't know what the deal was until she gave copies to her sisters.
Oh, yeah.
I thought she was going to do a power play.
And you know...
Like, he's mine now.
You know the funniest thing about that is she probably didn't even need to do it. The thing that...
But, so the thing is with this, she essentially gets Hector to wear a ring. That ring is magically bound so that he is now 100% loyal to her. And because the Forge Master's ability makes the soldiers that they raise 100% loyal to them. By whatever proxy or order of mathematics that is, they're all now 100% loyal to her. And she shares 3 more copies of that ring with her sisters. So now the 4 vampire empresses now have a Forge Master who can raise an army for them. But in the end, she does make some concessions for Hector. She doesn't
he will live he'll live in his own house.
He'll be treated well.
He will be able to walk wherever he wants in the castle, but he never gets to leave.
He can't leave.
He has to do the work that they tell him to do.
He has to raise an army.
And they're surely going to torture him a little bit more whenever they feel like.
So that's betrayal number 1 through sex. The more heartbreaking one for me was Alucard
and
the twins, basically.
Who betrayed the twins betrayed him essentially because they thought he was going to betray them.
See, now
they thought he was going to betray them.
I wasn't sure with that. I thought their plan the whole time was essentially they were vampire hunting humans. And they were looking for all the intel and information they could get on how to kill the most vampires possible.
Sure.
So it's interesting because their vampire master died. She was killed in the battle to kill Dracula. So there was a power vacuum left back in Japan, too.
That's right.
That's interesting that they even say, look, we know she's dead, but because she's dead, other vampire lords are going to come, and we're going to be back in the same position. So to me, they went to him as a way to learn, but then also to kill him because he's another vampire.
That's one way to look at it.
That's their plan anyway, as far as we know.
As they
work out
as they wrap him up in
that was brutal
coil,
like silver or blessed
where Alucard is attempting to use his teleport, his weird fans of the video game will know, like that weird light stepping he does. Like he's trying to do it, which is
if you're a Destiny player, he's warlock shade step out there.
He's attempting to get free and he's not able to, and in a with them not counting on his thousands of other powers that he has.
Well, and that was interesting because the way he gets out of it was by summoning his sort of like telekinetically controlled sword, and unfortunately puts an end to both of them. But he says something to the effect, they're about to kill him. He says something to the effect of, he says, I told you my father was not fond of magical weapons. I never said I didn't have one. And you're just like, oh, shit! And then out of nowhere, the sword comes and takes him out. So it's a brutal betrayal. And you kind of don't blame Alucard for reacting the way he does.
Sure. What comes next is kind of
I felt bad when he was curled up in like the fetal position by the like burned mark of where his father died. His own childhood bedroom, because good God. But then after that,
it's arguably the same road that Dracula went.
Madness.
Madness, because Dracula before his wife came wasn't waging war against humanity in a similar way, but his wife introduced him. And he was still isolated. So this is very much a similar thing where Alucard's storyline in season 3 ends with him putting the brother and sister on pikes, very much like his father, right at his front door as he comes to realize that, hey, maybe I have more in common with my dad than I originally thought.
He says something to the effect of like,
talking to his dad.
He's like, I suppose I could have just hung a sign, but this seems more your style. father, or something like that. And then it just Iris is back to show them like on pikes. I'm just like, oh god. But there's a lot of to end this kind of the good section here. There's a lot of bittersweet, kind of tough moments at the end for all of our heroes. So Alucard has this betrayal. Isaac probably has the best moment. He meets a crazy captain who has a philosophical conversation with, who I absolutely loved. He meets
the trade shop.
He meets a blind man at the bazaar who gives him basically a mirror, a teleportation mirror that he can
I'm going to hell, and if I go, I'm going to need a favor from a devil forger.
So he exchanges this like teleportation mirror for his whole army. For a get-out-of-hell ticket, essentially. He meets a lone magician woman, Miranda,
who I looked up and does not have
I asked Ellis about her, and he's like, look, not everybody is from the game. Like, some people I just made up, and that's one of them. So as far as we know, the captain and Miranda are both new creations from Ellis, who were great. They gave him people to talk to and people to bounce ideas off of and act as a mirror back on him. But then we see him defeat... My God, we didn't even talk about this.
A magician who
has what ability?
The ability to control anybody in his vicinity. Any human
love the
being.
way they visually represent it.
The eyes that are beaming out of there's white eyes.
Yeah, there's like an inverted eye that kind of is from their forehead, but they also have like a green crown of thorns.
Yeah, that was fantastic. To the point, he is able to control them to the point of insanity, where there is a giant ball made up of human beings that is...
he's just throwing them
at Isaac.
Isaac's army, because Isaac's army is pretty massed up by this point.
Yeah.
Because like you mentioned earlier, if he gets attacked, he stabs a guy, kills him, automatically turns
them into a new
creature. So it's kind of like a war of attrition.
Yeah.
It's like every one the enemy loses is another one that Isaac gains.
He gains,
so it's like you're really...
And he specifically tells his monsters, don't kill them, though.
Right.
Leave them, leave them
viable.
Leave them viable so I can bring them back.
Yeah. He's like, you can kill them, just don't rip their arms and legs off.
Yeah.
But then, that crazy, we can't even... Words don't do it.
It's really tough to describe, because I've never seen anything like that.
No, I just sat there like, I don't know what is happening. It's a giant ball of humans being thrown at, like you said, an 80-foot tall night creature.
As Isaac... is riding atop a...
devil horse.
It's like a devil horse?
Like a Draculus.
Yeah, it's something crazy. But Isaac eventually... And again, I was literally, as I was watching it, pouring through Castlevania Wikipedia articles.
What is going on?
To try to find if any of these characters who they were. I don't know if that magician is someone from the lore.
I don't know if he is, but I like the fact that... It's going to sound weird. So Isaac's background, he was a flagellist, right? So he was very devout Muslim practitioner, I believe, who was also a flagellist. So he would kind of whip himself as a means of prayer, as a means of focus, as a means of connecting with his deity. I feel like it was that mental toughness and focus that allowed him to break.
Yeah. Oh, that was such a good thing. I remember when that happened, I was like, oh, right, Isaac's a human being. I totally forgot.
Yeah. Yeah, because it doesn't seem like he is. But there's a contest of will between this really old, wizened magician who's controlled this whole town, and then Isaac at the end. And it looks like Isaac's about to go down, but then his strength of will just breaks through.
And Isaac, who is running up the tower stairs, is being bombarded by people.
Just clouds of
being thrown through windows, being thrown to the wall where they're sticking. And once Isaac is able to kill the magician and the magician's powers go away, all of the humans that were levitating in this giant ball of humanity instantly fall down.
Yeah. So I imagine he has a long night ahead where he just has to
keep stabbing all these.
But it's kind of a great finish for Isaac, because he's now basically lord of this town. Now it's a town of the dead, a town of night creatures, but he's kind of he even says this city might not be a bad place to rule over.
Yeah.
So you're wondering in season 4, is he going to continue to go and pursue Hector, or is he happy being in control of this small fiefdom?
Sure, yeah.
I don't know. Mm-hmm. Also, when things end for Trevor and Sypha, they essentially... Good Lord, how do we wrap this up? They find a demon that's
who is I thought, oh my God, this line. So when they go, so Saint Germain at one point, who has infiltrated the cult of Dracula. This is amazing to just say this.
Yeah, isn't it?
Who has infiltrated this cult of Dracula, has discovered a neon monster who is nailed to a cross, which it requested.
Yeah, he said,
that
I want
cult
you to do this
says at one point that, oh, we nailed you to the cross just like you wanted. So they open up a gate to hell where all the demons and monsters that we had talked about earlier start pouring out.
Right.
Sypha and Trevor are unleashing their powers, and Saint Germain is attempting to close.
They're protecting him. He's not really fighting. They're protecting him to get him into the portal, or at least near it, so he can close it and prevent more demons and night creatures from coming out.
And as we see in the penultimate episode conclusion, as a camera begins zooming through the landscape of hell, we come across a dilapidated mansion.
Looks familiar.
Looks kind of familiar. It doesn't have a roof. Didn't know who it could belong to until we see Dracula and his wife Lisa, I believe it was, embracing each other in hell. And Dracula, noticing the portal, looks at the camera, and we cut to black, which is very much, as we talked about, this could have been arguably the season finale, and I thought it was for a little bit. Yeah. But then we go to the next episode where luckily Saint Germain sacrifices himself, which, you know, might not be a sacrifice considering his weird time travel abilities.
It's a sacrifice to that realm. He's traveled to that realm and he's closed off that portal. However, he manages to do that. So he can probably still access it somehow. Yeah. And get out of there some way.
It'll probably take some magic doing.
Sure. Sure. And we may see that in season 4. But this is kind of leading to my bad a little bit. So now do you have anything else good that you want to talk about?
I mean, we covered most of it. I mean, really, like, just the animation, the character work, everything. The banter, the wits, the progression of the story, just amazing. So good. It's so good.
But as much as I love Graham McTavish as Dracula and Emily Swallow for her brief time as Lisa Tepish, I get a little concerned that it's going to be like the games where it's going to be like, well, we got to pull Dracula back. And then he's back as like there. In whatever body he's in. Oh, man. And they kill him again. I get a little worried that they're going to lean too much on that.
Oh, yeah. Those, like, I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but the resurrections of Dracula in the Castlevania games are so insane. Yeah. Like, where people are trying to get his different body parts and put them all together, where, like the cults and all those other things. Yeah, it's ridiculous. I hope that they don't, like, because honestly, I wouldn't have wanted to see Dracula return this early anyway. Yeah. Even though it's been a while since season 2 had finished, like, I think that the new players on the board are fantastic with who they are.
They're more interesting to me than revisiting them.
Yeah, a world without Dracula is a much more interesting thing right now than just having, this one force that they should look at and everything.
I think we'll probably get a mix of both, though. I think we'll probably get to see more of the characters we got to meet and spend time with this season. Yeah. I'd be surprised if they didn't at least, now that they've opened that box up again, I'd be surprised if they didn't give Dracula and Lisa at least something to close it back on.
Sure, yeah. Maybe. I would imagine like a series finale or something, but maybe they'll bring him back sooner than that. I don't know. We'll see.
What's interesting is it's 2 of them together. So it's not just Mad Vlad, like, set for revenge.
Dracula's good. Like, no, he's good in terms of, like, he's content. That's the sense.
They seemed fine.
They seemed fine.
It's like surrounded by hellfire. And
but they have each other, and that's all they ever really needed, I suppose.
So I don't know what they're going to do with it, unless it's just the idea is that these exterior forces keep trying to bring Dracula back, which that's okay. That's interesting.
Yeah, sure.
Is there anything else that didn't really work for you this season?
To touch on one thing, just one brief thing that I thought was pretty good was the Trevor and Sypha heart-to-heart that they had after the adventure was done.
Yeah, and that's the kind of bittersweet ending.
Yeah,
they've kind of fallen in.
Because Sypha had been going on all these adventures and thought it was such a grand time. What a fun time. I'm with the guy I'm dating.
Firebending.
I'm firebending. I'm killing demons. It's all adventures. And then this terrible realization that the governor of the judge of the town was killing anybody in a very hot fuzz move, was killing people who disobeyed, who ran, like kids who ran in the streets were being brutally impaled on spikes.
And then he kept their shoes as a memento.
Very bad.
That's one of my bads, and it is.
Just
kind of like Trevor and Sypha.
Essentially, for Sypha to be like, or for Trevor to say, "We lived a couple of days in your world, and now you're going to live a couple of days in mine."
Man, that sucked. It sucked because you could tell that like Trevor was kind of like. He's like, I really enjoy what we're doing right now, but the real world is still... I've lived it for a long time. But I was bummed that those two are literally the only real heroes of the story.
Yeah,
because Alucard is now kind of on the fence. We don't know what's going to happen with him. So we know that Trevor and Sypha are kind of the, like, you know, the pure gold-hearted heroes.
Yeah.
They're going to do the right thing whether they want to or not.
Sure.
But I really wanted the judge
to be just a good person.
And it's Jason Isaacs, too. Yeah. He rarely gets to play like a good character. He's always a villain.
He lets go of the cult leader.
The cult leader go, but he does send him to the same pit.
That's true. That's true.
So that was a weird twist at the end.
Kind of weird.
It felt a little cynical, a little nihilistic for me that you couldn't just let him die and not have to have these literal skeletons in his closet at the end. I don't know what the point of it was.
As if the world isn't dark enough to be like, I know, like...
like, I get that the judge is supposed to be this very, like, black and white. It's either, like, you follow my rules and law and order, or you don't and you're punished.
Sure.
One or the other, and that's it. And I get it. But when it comes to kids just, like, running around and he sends them to the death...
That's comically evil.
It's bad. And it doesn't... There's no reason.
Yeah, for sure. I'll take their shoes and have them as in my own personal murder closet.
I gotta tell you, when he came out of that closet and he only, like, wiped the 2 fingers of his hand, I was like, what the fuck? What are you doing?
Oh, man.
It was bad. The only other thing, this is much less minor, like a more of a minor bad for me. I wanted to see a better weapon upgrade for Trevor.
For Trevor? Yeah, just 2 whips that he had the whole time.
He had them. He just decided to use both of them at one point.
So it's funny because there was an Easter egg to the game that people were expecting is that there's a number of things that the Belmonts can do in the video games whenever they get certain items, one of which is a cross.
Right.
That they can essentially unleash this giant energy attack that kills everything on the screen.
Right.
And that's what people thought they saw.
I think they're probably saving it.
Yeah, they're probably saving it for something else or something big. But yeah, Sypha gets like new powers and Trevor uses 2 whips instead of 1.
It was like when the very first scene we have with Sypha and Trevor, they're kind of traveling along in a cart, and we'll talk about that in a minute in the LOLs. But at one point, Sypha is literally jetting through the air on like bursts of fire. This is Airbender. But and then she learns how to bend like electricity at the end, which took, Airbender, like it took Zuko 3 seasons to learn how to do.
Well, technically it took her 3 seasons.
Yeah, that's true. So they're on the same timeline. But then when Trevor's like big weapon upgrade moment is like, I've got 2 whips
that I've had the whole time.
Oh, buddy. And not to take anything away from the animation, the action, the fight sequences, because they're amazing.
Yeah.
But you gotta step that up in season 4.
They'll have to figure out something.
Like Evan and I were talking, Drac has a shadow whip that he forms out of his own blood at one point in the games. Yeah. That's pretty cool. Like Trevor, he needs something else, whether it's another artifact that he finds in the vaults or in his travels. Something. He needs something else. But that was really it. There wasn't too much.
Honestly, there isn't a lot to critique outside of like I mentioned. I think
stuff,
it's minor stuff. I think that it's with the thing that I mentioned earlier with the Game of Thrones style of storytelling. That's going to come down to your preference in terms of. Some people, I think that, like, I really appreciate the slow burn format and not having everything instantly come back together for the end. But I know that some people might see it as a stepping stone to something bigger.
Right. Because it does kind of set up, like, eventually, for better or worse, Trevor and Sypha will have to cross paths with Alucard again, whether it's as allies or maybe not.
Yeah. And like, when you look at it on paper... Like, I think that the weakest of the storylines, even though it was good, was Hector and Lenore.
Interesting. Okay.
Because
It's all set up.
It's all set up, but it's also the entire season is essentially the cat and mouse game between them both.
Which I liked from kind of a cerebral, sort of like reading a mystery novel.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Because it was very low action. It was all mental manipulations and mind games.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting wrinkle for that. Plus, I will say, I did like the 4 vampire...
I did too.
Really dynamic,
What the name of the big one is?
Striga.
And then the other lover,
Marana, who doesn't... Marana's
they don't really have much to do.
Striga's great because her personality comes through. She's big, she's imposing, she wants to go out and fight.
Yeah.
She's very much the warlord. And she's great.
Yeah.
Marana, she's kind of the... They all actually
Stoic.
talk about their defining characteristics, where Carmilla's kind of like the wild card. And she's like Charlie Day coming in, you don't know what she's going to do.
And I guess that Carmilla doesn't have a lot to do this season.
She just kind of, she sparked. Yeah. She sparked them into action. So their plan now in future seasons is to like essentially cordon off an empire for themselves and farm in a bunch of human cattle.
Yeah.
So they can essentially live forever and control this region and have...
In a very disturbing, you know what's great about humans? You just put a few of them together and they make new humans for you.
They make more humans.
And it's like, oh man, that's kind of...
They're not wrong.
Dark.
They're not wrong, though.
They're not wrong, but...
So it felt very much like setup, and this was just the first step of what they needed to do in order to do that. So
sure.
I thought it was fun.
It's a minor quibble.
Yeah.
Really, all the stories were strong, well acted, amazing animation. It's really, like in the review I wrote, it's the best season of the 3 for me, definitely. Just in terms of, all the different moving pieces and everything, and the new characters they introduced were great, so...
Well, you got quality and quantity with it, too, because it's the longest at tense. And you got Lance Reddick to do one episode, I think, as a nameless
And he was
captain.
fantastic.
He's great.
Great, nameless captain.
But, give me more of this guy. Anything else that didn't quite work for you before we get to the stuff that made us laugh?
No, not really. It's honestly, the things I mentioned are minor at best. Yeah. It's a fantastic story. I hope it goes on for many more seasons.
I hope it does, but I also hope that they end it on their terms.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I definitely hope that they do, because the thing is, this is ultimately the story of Trevor, Sypha, and Alucard.
Right.
I don't know if they would jump into the legacy of the Belmonts. You could technically continue to follow the story of Alucard, but I feel like we'd be missing out on some stuff if we were to continue into the far future with just his story and everything, but we'll see.
We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
So what made you laugh, intentionally or otherwise, on this season?
Well, as we mentioned, the Alucard and his isolated madness of talking with the dolls was really amazing. The sex scene of Alucard, and while we talked about its themes and it's very powerful, it is still a threesome with a brother and sister.
Yeah. You're not wrong.
Alucard is getting down with that brother and sister. He swings both ways.
I think he's just kind of sitting there like, I don't know what's about to happen.
I don't know what's going to happen, but man, it's been a long time. It's been an exceptionally long time. The Cult of Dracula, just in general, how enamored they are with.
They're also kind of dumb.
They're very dumb, but they're kind of like that. They're like the church in the first season, essentially, which was just. They're walking around town and they're carving that sigil into the side of houses.
Which was the alchemical symbol for sulfur.
Yeah, that's right.
It was pretty cool because it actually was, their symbol was actually one of the alchemical symbols.
Oh, nice.
For sulfur.
Yeah.
So it was pretty neat, which is their symbol for hell. And when they found out about that from Saint Germain, they were just fanboys. They were just tell us more.
You truly deserve to be with us.
I love that they... So there's moments. I love the Saint Germain stuff because he kind of provides the levity through either by duping these kind of idiots.
His reaction.
Or his reactions.
His reaction to fighting the monster and then running into them instantly.
Well, even before that, when he goes into the priory, because they let him in. They won't let anybody else in there.
Yeah.
And he goes in, and he's basically in a church, except the crucifix is turned upside down. There's a literal pile of human feces, and you're in the corner.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, there's a pile of disheveled books, and everybody's just kind of lazing around. So he walks in and is just kind of okay, this is bad. But he manages to just worm his way past these guys.
Yeah.
I loved every interaction he had with Sala, who's the head of the
yeah. And also he does a great job of bouncing off Trevor and Sypha.
He riffs. He's
very much
he's an improv
going blow for blow with them on all the witty.
He was great, and you didn't know what to make of him at first, and he ended up being a really great character. Pretty much everything Trevor did or said, though, always made me laugh. Because he's got that like dry delivery. And
Sypha's a good right-hand man to him. She's able to, when she says at one point, like, "Oh, and then I'll burn you alive," or something to Saint Germain, like
back and forth. Richard Armitage, Alejandra Reynoso, fantastic as Trevor and Sypha. One of my favorite interactions with the two of them, and this is how you know 100% that they're in a physical relationship. Once they get off the road and Trevor makes his way to a bartender and orders beer for the first time in God knows how long, and he's like, "Oh God, it's better than sex." And she hears him and is like, "Well, I guess you're like sleeping alone tonight or whatever." And he's like, And he's kind of like, he's torn between like, do I finish this beer or do I go after her and like smooth things
Tink.
Yeah.
And she freezes the beer.
And she freezes it, and it's that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Did you catch the Grant Dynasty, however you say his name? Did you catch that nod?
No, I missed that one.
So Grant is one of the other characters in Castlevania lore who's like the pirate, the very like nimble, agile, jumping.
Castlevania 3.
So,
that's right, because there was Alucard, Sypha, and Trevor. So yeah, Grant is the one that they haven't introduced yet.
Exactly, and fans are pissed. And Ellis knows that, so this was his nod to Grant. When Trevor and Sypha are on the road, they're talking about how they're basically in a landlocked country. There's no rivers or there's no water anywhere. So they say, well, we didn't run into that one crazy bandit who called himself the Pirate of the Roads, and he had a sailboat up on wheels on the path. That's your nod.
That's how, honestly, like, you can't blame Ellis for not being able to throw in all the crazy crap from... Yeah, it's like, what are you going to do? Is he going to be the third wheel, or is he going to hang out with Alucard to essentially destroy his isolated, thing or whatever?
And that's that, like, you brought Saint Germain in kind of that role, but he had a different part to play.
Yeah,
that was off to the side of the story. So... yeah, I don't know that he'll bring Grant in if and when they do. I'm sure the fans will love it, but this was a nice nod for now. He does exist kind of somewhere out there in the world, but he seems crazy. The only thing else that made me laugh was that giant ball of humans.
Oh, that was so ridiculous and such a cool visual. Like, how could you even think of that?
It was
really
insane.
And really, I can't stop laughing at the fact that Castlevania Judgment of all things was given an Easter egg. That game is ridiculous. Like, if people want to watch some videos of like,
go stream it on Twitch.
I'll go stream it or something. But like the videos of that, like that game brings in not only the characters that you know, but like characters like the Wolfman from Castlevania 64, who was a Belmont. Like all these crazy other things. But like even for I can't imagine, like, we've talked a lot about Easter eggs that we know of and we're kind of familiar with.
And
barely. So I can't imagine someone who's like really steeped in the Castlevania lore who's been following it since the beginning, or what they're going to be able to pick through. Because I'm sure there's a ton of stuff that you and I missed just in terms of like references, stuff that was shown in the Infinite Corridor. I'm sure people are going to be able to. I'm sure that Aboriginal gentleman was someone from the games that we just didn't know.
I don't know. We saw a bunch of people running through what looked like a very lush, like Egyptian pyramid or complex in its prime kind of thing. There was a ton of stuff that was in there, some sci-fi elements, a lot of futuristic stuff. So it was just kind of like a real mind blow. I don't know.
Yeah.
If you guys know, let us know. Here, Sean and I talked about this on last week's episode, but have you beaten multiple or one of the Castlevania games?
So my favorite Castlevania game, the one that I played most recently, is Castlevania Lords of Shadow. Which is essentially, it's a fantastic, I love that game. And it got mixed reviews, but it's essentially a journey into the early life of Dracula. It works really well. Castlevania Lords of Shadow 2 is terrible. And that's when you play as Dracula. And it really broke my heart because I was waiting for that game for a really long time.
I'm sure.
But yeah, I had beaten... I'm sure at some time I'd beaten the first Castlevania. I played Symphony of the Night more times than I can count, probably at this point, because I have it on my little Vita. That's usually my go-to on long trips or whatever. Super Castlevania on the Super Nintendo and everything I played. I haven't played a lot of the DS or 3DS or Game Boy games or anything, but... You can pick up a lot of those games. I think there's like an anniversary collection.
Oh, I'm sure they have
there's like a bundle that has Symphony of the Night and Rondo X on it, which is, I can't remember the full name of that, but it's a Sega Genesis one.
I just love watching the speedruns because I'd never played them as a kid.
Oh, I'm actually going to watch. I'd love to see those actually.
What I love about them is how and this is a digression, but I love how they're like, well, the fastest way forward is to face backwards and just whip jump your way this way. So you just hear him scream over and over again.
I'm still waiting, Mr. Ellis. I'm waiting for a turkey to bounce out of a wall at some point in the...
You and me both, but I don't even know what that is, but I want to see it. Anything else that made you laugh before we get to our recommendations?
No, it's just really like the quibbles that I have are minor.
Sure.
It's really just it is a fantastic entry into an already fantastic series, and I hope it continues further into the future. Just really well done. I hope it keeps going.
Fantastic.
So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, to let you guys know, in case you haven't heard our recommendation section before, we have one of three options. We can recommend it and let you guys know why. We have, over the past hour or so, let you know why we would recommend it. Or we could not recommend it, and at that point, you have the option to give it the dip. That is the dip from Who Framed Roger Rabbit, meaning we will dip this here cartoon into a vat of the dip, and it will be erased from all existence for all time. We'll never talk about it again. I have a feeling we're not going to do
I don't think we're really going to do that with this one.
Do you recommend it?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think that it's definitely... This Castlevania series, I don't think, is necessarily something that you're going to be able to recommend to everyone because it is so... It's graphic, it's adult, it has vampires, it has weird... Cthulhu shows up at one point. Like, for real.
And
there's
angels.
Like, all
this,
not like that. It's tough to be like... But Game of Thrones had a lot of weird stuff in it, too. But, yes, I would recommend it to fans of Castlevania. They're going to eat this season up. To fans of animation, to fans of Avatar, The Last Airbender, to fans of just... good storytelling.
Yeah.
It's really just across the board. It's really fantastic.
And I would say, the same. But I would say go back and watch it from the beginning, even if you have, but it's been a while since you watched the earlier episodes.
Yeah.
For one reason, this season alone is about as long as the previous two seasons combined. There were only 12 episodes before total for the first two seasons. It really is nice to watch them all together as one 22 episode run.
Yeah.
Because you can you get a better sense of time, a better sense of character building over time.
It was funny because I was doing a rewatch and then I got the screeners. And so then I was,
Same.
So I had watched the first season. I'm like, I'll start watching season 2. And then I got an email that was essentially you want to... I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I could try to finish off season 2 before I do that, but I really want to see season 3 right now.
It was really good. That was the thing. I was like a kid on Christmas morning, opening that up and just being like, what are we going to get into? Season 2 definitely has its merits, and it's definitely worth a watch. And it sets up everything in season 3, obviously.
Yeah.
So if you have the time, if you've got 11 hours or just want to take a day off of work, just go watch.
You want a long binge session? We'll just watch the whole series from start to finish. Yeah.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, we're going to wrap up the show here. But first, you heard him on the episode, our friend Bobby Anthem. You can also hear him on his paranormal podcast, Inhuman Experience, with his co-host, Bobby Blades. Find them both on Twitter at IEXP_podcast. Bobby also has a solo show called In Search of My Lost Soul, also available along with the Inhuman Experience podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and pretty much everywhere else podcasts are found. Thank you once again, Mr. Evan Valentine.
Thank you for having me.
Love to have you here and talk about crazy stuff for hours at a time. Where can the folks find you out there on the interwebs?
So you can read my stuff now on the regular, almost every single day at comicbook.com. I cover, as I said before, animation, comic books in general, WWE stuff now, as well as horror. And so really feel free to read my stuff. It's really been fantastic so far, being able to just write about the stuff that I love and talk about it and everything. It's been cool.
Absolutely.
So yeah, feel free to, or follow me on Twitter, EV Comedy. Yeah, that's it.
Very cool.
Or go ahead and read my old stuff from Collider, where I used to write.
I was going to say, it's a bummer. I'm happy for Evan that he has this new gig and he actually enjoys what he's doing. But it's a bummer because I can no longer tap him for comic book explainer.
Oh, you can always tap me for... Just have to go through a number of different channels.
Yeah, exactly. We'll figure out what his pseudonym is going to be. Alucard Belmont or something. As for me, you can find me over at the aforementioned Collider.com. You can check me out on Twitter at Dr. Claw MD. And if you're the reading sort, you can pick up The Science of Breaking Bad from MIT Press. Available anywhere books are sold.
Read it. It's good.
It is good. Yeah. I have multiple copies sitting right behind me. And there's even an audiobook, which I did not record. So that's a story for another day. As for this here show itself, if you want to support us, that's great. Check out our Patreon page to see how. You can also tell a friend or leave a review on Apple iTunes. Sean tells me it works, but neither of us know how. You can also slide into our DMs on Twitter at Mourning Tunes. Remember, that's Morning with a U. It's also Morning with a U on Instagram and Facebook at Saturday Morning Cartoons. You can drop us an old-fashioned email, SaturdayMorningCartoons@gmail.com. You can check out all these links in our link tree in the bio for all of our social media sites. You can also listen to this show on YouTube, Apple Podcasts and iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, anywhere you listen to podcasts. That's going to do it for us today. Thank you guys so much for joining us for this Castlevania chat, Season 3. Woo! We're hoping to see you guys for Season 4. So feel free to leave a comment with your theories, spoiler theories, for Season 4. And be sure to ask Sam Dietz when Season 4 is on the way.
I'm sure he's going to love that.
He's going to love it. Don't tell him we sent you. Thanks for listening. See you later.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody. Thanks a lot for listening to Saturday Morning Cartoons. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to transform and roll out.